The perfect wife nobody wanted. Alessa Hart woke up at exactly 5 in the morning like she did every single day. The sun wasn't even up yet, the birds weren't even singing yet, but Alessa was already out of bed and walking to the kitchen in her soft slippers. She had work to do. She always had work to do. The kitchen was big and cold and expensive. Everything in the Hart mansion was big and cold and expensive. Marble floors that hurt your feet in winter, crystal chandeliers that sparkled but gave no warmth, paintings on the walls that cost more than most people's houses. Alessa had lived here for 3 years, but it never felt like home. It felt like a museum, a beautiful prison where she was supposed to smile and be grateful. She started cooking breakfast, eggs exactly the way her husband liked them, with the yolks still a little bit runny. Toast cut into triangles, never squares, because his mother said squares were for common people. Fresh orange juice squeezed by hand because the machine-made kind was beneath the Hart family. Coffee at exactly the right temperature, not too hot and not too cold. While the eggs cooked, Alessa went to the laundry room. She pulled out her husband's suits and checked every single one for wrinkles. If she found even one tiny wrinkle, she would iron it until the fabric was perfect. Dominic Hart was an important man. He ran a company worth billions of dollars. He met with presidents and kings and celebrities. His wife could not send him out into the world looking anything less than perfect. This was Alessa's life, cooking and cleaning and ironing and smiling. Being the perfect wife to a man who barely looked at her. Being the perfect daughter-in-law to a woman who hated her. Being perfect, perfect, perfect every single day and getting nothing in return. Her husband Dominic never said good morning to her. He would come downstairs in his expensive suit, sit at the table, eat the breakfast she made, read his newspaper, and leave for work. Sometimes he would nod at her. Sometimes he would say, "The eggs are cold," or "There's too much salt," or "Why is there a spot on my cup?" But he never said thank you. He never said I love you. He never held her hand or kissed her cheek or asked her how she slept. For 3 years, Alessa told herself this was normal. Some marriages were not about love. Some marriages were about duty and partnership and building a life together. Her parents had loved each other deeply, but they died in a car accident when Alessa was 18 and left her with nothing. No money, no home, no family. She had been working as a waitress when she met Dominic at a charity event. He was handsome and rich and powerful. His mother picked Alessa because she was pretty and quiet and had no family who would cause problems. It wasn't a love story, it was a business deal. Alessa knew this, but she thought she could change things. She thought if she just worked hard enough, if she just loved him enough, if she just proved herself enough, Dominic would eventually love her back. Every morning she woke up hoping today would be different. Every night she went to sleep, disappointed. But she never gave up. She never stopped trying. She never stopped believing that love could grow where there was none. She was wrong. She was so terribly wrong. The day everything changed started like any other Tuesday. Alessa finished making breakfast. She set the table with the fancy plates and the cloth napkins folded into little swans. She arranged fresh flowers in a crystal vase, because Dominic's mother Victoria said a proper table must always have fresh flowers. She checked her reflection in the mirror to make sure her hair was neat, and her dress was pressed, and her smile was in place. Then the doorbell rang. Alessa wasn't expecting anyone. The Hart family didn't have visitors in the morning. Dominic was already at work. Victoria was at her weekly spa appointment. The servants had the day off. Alessa was alone in the huge mansion, with no one but herself. She walked to the front door. Her heels clicked on the marble floor. The sound echoed through the empty hallway like a heartbeat. Something felt strange. Something felt wrong. The air felt heavy, like the sky before a thunderstorm. Alessa's hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob. She didn't know why she was scared. It was just a doorbell. It was just a visitor. It was just an ordinary Tuesday. But it wasn't ordinary. It wasn't ordinary at all. She opened the door and found a woman standing on the front steps. The woman was beautiful. No, beautiful wasn't a strong enough word. The woman was stunning. She had long black hair that fell past her shoulders like silk. She had perfect skin without a single mark or blemish. She had full red lips and dark eyes, and cheekbones that looked like they were carved by an artist. She was wearing a red dress that hugged her body and showed off every curve. She looked like a movie star. She looked like a goddess. She looked like everything Alessa was not. But that wasn't what made Alessa's heart stop beating in her chest. That wasn't what made her knees go weak and her vision go blurry and her whole world tilt sideways like a ship in a storm. It was the little boy holding the woman's hand. He was about 5 years old. He had dark hair and dark eyes and a little dimple in his chin. He was wearing a tiny suit like a miniature businessman. He looked up at Alessa with a curious expression on his face. He looked exactly like Dominic. Not a little bit like Dominic, not somewhat like Dominic, exactly like Dominic. The same eyes, the same nose, the same shape of his face, the same way his eyebrows curved when he was thinking. It was like looking at a photograph of her husband as a child. It was like looking at a ghost. "You must be the wife," the woman said. Her voice was smooth and confident like honey mixed with poison. She didn't wait to be invited inside. She just walked past Alessa like she owned the place, pulling the little boy along with her. Her expensive perfume filled the air and made Alessa feel dizzy. "I'm Serena, Dominic's first love, his true love really, the one he should have married. And this little angel right here is Daniel. Say hello to the nice lady, Daniel." "Hello," the little boy said politely. "Daniel is Dominic's son," Serena continued. She was already walking through the hallway, looking at the paintings on the walls like she was inspecting her own property. "His real son, his only son, the heir to the Hart Empire. I've been raising him alone for 5 years, but I think it's time for him to meet his father properly. Don't you agree?" Alessa couldn't speak. She couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. Her brain was trying to process what was happening, but it was like trying to hold water in her hands. Everything was slipping away. Everything was falling apart. Her husband had a child. Her husband had a child with another woman. Her husband had a child with this beautiful, confident woman who walked into the Hart Mansion like she belonged there. Because maybe she did belong there. Maybe Alessa was the one who didn't belong. Serena turned around and looked at Alessa with a smile that wasn't friendly at all. It was the smile of a winner. The smile of someone who had already won and was just enjoying watching the loser figure it out. "Oh, honey," Serena said softly. "You look like you're about to faint. Why don't you sit down? You're going to need to sit down for what comes next." Alessa didn't sit down. She couldn't sit down. Her legs felt like they were made of stone. Her whole body felt frozen in place, like a statue. She just stood there in the hallway of the mansion she had called home for 3 years, staring at this woman and this child who had appeared out of nowhere to destroy her life. Serena made herself comfortable in the living room. She sat on the most expensive couch like it was her throne. Little Daniel sat next to her, swinging his legs back and forth because his feet didn't touch the floor. He looked around the room with wide eyes, taking in all the fancy decorations and expensive furniture. He didn't understand what was happening. He was just a child. He just knew his mother had brought him to a big, beautiful house and told him he was going to meet his daddy. "This is a nice place," Serena said casually, running her fingers along the velvet armrest. Dominic always did have good taste. Well, in most things anyway. She looked at Alessa and her smile got sharper. "I'm sure you've done your best to keep it nice for him. That's what you are, isn't it? The little housewife, the one who cooks and cleans and waits for her husband to come home. How sweet, how simple, how boring. Alessa finally found her voice. It came out small and shaky, nothing like the confident woman she pretended to be every day. I don't understand. Dominic never told me about you. He never told me about any of this. Serena laughed. Oh, it was a beautiful laugh, musical and light, but it cut through Alessa like a knife. Of course he didn't tell you. Why would he? You were just the replacement, the placeholder, the boring little wife he married because I wasn't available. She leaned forward, her dark eyes glittering with something that looked like triumph. Let me tell you a story, sweetheart. Let me tell you the real story of Dominic Hart. Alessa didn't want to hear the story. She wanted to run away. She wanted to cover her ears and pretend none of this was happening. But her feet wouldn't move. Her hands wouldn't lift. She was trapped, forced to listen, as Serena unraveled everything she thought she knew. Dominic and I met when we were 16 years old, Serena began. We were in high school together. I was the most beautiful girl in school, and he was the richest boy. It was destiny, really. We fell in love instantly. That deep, passionate, all-consuming love that you only find once in a lifetime. We were together for 8 years. 8 perfect years. We were going to get married. We had the whole thing planned. The dress, the venue, the flowers, everything. She paused and her eyes got a faraway look, like she was remembering something precious. Daniel tugged at her sleeve, and she patted his hand absently without looking at him. But then something happened, Serena continued. I got an opportunity to go to Paris, a modeling contract, the chance of a lifetime. I couldn't say no. Dominic begged me to stay, but I had to follow my dreams. I thought he would wait for me. I thought our love was strong enough to survive anything, but when I got to Paris, I found out I was pregnant. Alessa felt her stomach drop. She looked at Daniel, at his innocent face, at his eyes that were so much like her husband's eyes. This child was made from love, real love, the kind of love that Alessa had never experienced with Dominic, no matter how hard she tried. I was scared and alone in a foreign country, Serena said, her voice getting softer, like she was the victim in all of this. I didn't know what to do. I tried to call Dominic, but his mother answered the phone. Victoria, that horrible woman. She told me Dominic didn't want to talk to me. She told me to never call again. She told me that if I tried to come back, she would make my life miserable. I was young and frightened, and I believed her. So I stayed in Paris and raised Daniel alone. I struggled for years. I worked so hard. But I never stopped loving Dominic, and I never stopped believing that one day we would be together again. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the perfectly manicured gardens like they belonged to her. Then I heard that Dominic got married. To you? Some nobody waitress with no money and no family. I couldn't believe it. My Dominic, married to someone so ordinary. I knew it couldn't be real. I knew he didn't really love you. I knew he was just filling the empty space I left behind. Serena turned around and looked at Alessa with something that might have been pity if it wasn't so cruel. So I came back. I came back to claim what's mine. My son deserves to know his father, and Dominic deserves to know his son. And you, she tilted her head like she was examining an insect. You deserve to know the truth. You were never his real wife. You were just keeping his bed warm until I came home. The front door opened. Heavy footsteps echoed through the hallway. Alessa's heart started pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She knew those footsteps. She knew that sound. She had listened for it every evening for 3 years, waiting for her husband to come home. Dominic walked into the living room. He was still wearing his work suit. His briefcase was still in his hand. He must have left the office in the middle of the day, which he never did. Someone must have called him. Someone must have told him that Serena was here. He looked at Serena. His face changed. Alessa had never seen that expression on his face before. In 3 years of marriage, through breakfasts and dinners, and holidays and quiet nights, she had never seen Dominic look at anyone the way he was looking at Serena right now. His eyes were soft, his lips were slightly parted. He looked like a man seeing water after years in the desert. He looked like a man coming home. "Serena," he whispered. Just one word, just her name. But the way he said it told Alessa everything she needed to know. Serena smiled, and it was a real smile this time, warm and glowing and full of love. "Hello, Dominic. I missed you. I missed you so much." Daniel stood up from the couch. He looked at Dominic with nervous excitement. "Are you my daddy? Mommy said you're my daddy." Dominic looked at the little boy. He looked at his eyes, his nose, his chin, all the features that matched his own. Something broke in his face. Something that had been locked away for years came flooding out. He dropped his briefcase and fell to his knees in front of the child. "Yes," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I'm your daddy. I'm so sorry I wasn't there. I'm so sorry I didn't know. But I'm here now. I'm here and I'm never letting you go." He pulled Daniel into a hug. The little boy wrapped his arms around Dominic's neck and held on tight. Serena watched them with tears streaming down her perfect face. It was a beautiful moment. A family being reunited. A father meeting his son for the first time. And Alessa stood there watching, invisible, forgotten, like she didn't exist at all. Dominic finally stood up, still holding Daniel in his arms. He looked at Alessa, and his face changed again. The softness disappeared. The warmth vanished. He looked at her the way he always looked at her, like she was a piece of furniture, like she was nothing special, like she was easily replaced. "Alessa," he said flatly. "We need to talk. Go to the study. I'll be there in a minute." He didn't wait for her response. He turned back to Serena and Daniel, smiling at them, touching Serena's face gently like she was made of precious glass. Alessa watched for one more moment, feeling her heart shatter into a million tiny pieces. Then she turned and walked to the study, on legs that felt like they might collapse at any second. The study was dark and quiet. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound books that nobody ever read. A big wooden desk sat in the middle of the room, covered with papers and pens, and a lamp that gave off weak yellow light. Alessa sat in one of the chairs and waited. She didn't know what she was waiting for. She already knew what was coming. She could feel it in her bones, like she could feel a storm coming before the first drop of rain. 20 minutes passed, maybe 30. Alessa lost track of time. She just sat there, staring at the wall, thinking about the last 3 years. All the breakfasts she had made, all the suits she had ironed, all the smiles she had forced onto her face, all the nights she had lain awake next to a husband who never reached for her, all the prayers she had whispered, asking God to make him love her, just a little bit, just enough to make the loneliness bearable. It was all for nothing. It was always for nothing. The door opened and Dominic walked in. His face was unreadable, cold, distant. He sat behind the desk like he was about to conduct a business meeting. He didn't look at Alessa like she was his wife. He looked at her like she was a problem he needed to solve. "I'm going to make this quick," he said. "I want a divorce." Even though Alessa had been expecting it, even though she knew it was coming, the words still hit her like a punch to the stomach. She gasped and gripped the arms of her chair. "Dominic, please, can we talk about this? Can we try to work things out? I know this is a shock. I know Serena coming back changes things, but we've been married for 3 years. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" "No," he said simply. "It doesn't. I married you because Serena was gone and my mother said I needed a wife. You were convenient, quiet, obedient. You didn't cause problems, but you were never the one I wanted. Serena was always the one I wanted. She's back now and she brought my son, my heir, the future of the Hart family." I'm not going to lose them again. But Daniel... Alessa stopped herself. She didn't want to say what she was thinking. She didn't want to be cruel. But the question burned in her mind. Was Daniel really Dominic's son? Had anyone done a DNA test? What if Serena was lying? What if this was all a trick? Dominic seemed to read her mind. His eyes got hard and cold. Don't even think about questioning whether Daniel is my son. I can see it in his face. He's mine. And even if there was any doubt, I don't care. Serena is the love of my life. She's the one I want, not you. Never you. Alessa felt tears starting to fall down her cheeks. She couldn't stop them. 3 years of trying so hard, of being so perfect, of loving someone who would never love her back. All of it came pouring out of her eyes. Please, she whispered. Please don't do this. I have nowhere to go. I have no one. You're all I have. Dominic's expression didn't change. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a folder. He slid it across the desk toward her. These are the divorce papers. Sign them. You'll get nothing. The prenup you signed before our wedding makes sure of that. You came into this marriage with nothing and you'll leave with nothing. That's fair, don't you think? You were never really a heart anyway. Alessa stared at the folder. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely pick it up. She opened it and saw pages and pages of legal documents. Words swam in front of her eyes. She couldn't read them. She couldn't understand them. All she could understand was that her life was over. Sign them now, Dominic said impatiently. I want this done today. Serena and Daniel are moving in tomorrow. I won't have you in the same house as them. Tomorrow? Alessa looked up in shock. Where am I supposed to go by tomorrow? I need time to find a place, to figure out what to do. That's not my problem. Dominic stood up and walked to the door. You have until midnight to pack your things and leave. If you're not gone by then, I'll have security remove you. And Alessa? He paused at the door and looked back at her with eyes that held no warmth, no kindness, no trace of the man she had tried so hard to love. Don't make a scene. Don't cause problems. Don't embarrass me. Just sign the papers, pack your bags, and disappear. It's the least you can do after wasting 3 years of my life. He walked out and closed the door behind him. Alessa sat alone in the dark study, holding the divorce papers in her trembling hands. She could hear laughter coming from somewhere else in the house. Dominic's laugh, Serena's laugh, Daniel's little giggle, the sound of a happy family. A family she was never part of. A family she was never meant to be part of. She picked up the pen on the desk. Her tears dripped onto the papers, smearing the ink. But she signed anyway. Page after page after page. She signed away 3 years of her life. She signed away her home, her security, her dreams. She signed away everything and got nothing in return. When she was done, she put the pen down and stared at her signature. Alessa Hart. But she wasn't a heart anymore. She wasn't anything anymore. She was just a nobody, a waitress from nowhere, a woman with no money, no family, no future. She stood up on shaking legs and walked out of the study. She didn't look toward the living room where the laughter was coming from. She couldn't bear to see them together. She went upstairs to the bedroom she had shared with Dominic for 3 years, the bedroom where he had never once held her while she slept, and started to pack. Alessa didn't have much to pack. When she really looked at her closet, when she really examined what belonged to her and what belonged to her life as Mrs. Dominic Hart, she realized almost nothing was truly hers. The expensive dresses were bought for company parties and business dinners. The jewelry was borrowed from the Hart family collection, pieces that Victoria counted and inspected every month to make sure nothing went missing. The shoes, the handbags, the silk scarves, all of it was costume. Props for the role she had been playing for 3 years. She found her old suitcase in the back of the closet. It was small and worn, with a broken zipper on one side, and a stain on the corner that never came out, no matter how many times she scrubbed it. This suitcase had belonged to her mother. It was one of the only things Alessa had left from her parents. She used to look at it sometimes when she felt lonely, running her fingers over the faded fabric, imagining she could still smell her mother's perfume. She packed the few things that were really hers, the clothes she had owned before her marriage, simple cotton dresses, and worn jeans that Victoria had forbidden her from wearing in public. A photograph of her parents on their wedding day, smiling and young and so in love. A small gold necklace her mother used to wear, the chain so thin it was almost invisible. A journal she had kept since she was a teenager, filled with her private thoughts and dreams and fears. That was it. That was everything. 3 years of being the perfect wife, and she could fit her entire life into one small broken suitcase. The door opened behind her. Alessa turned around expecting to see Dominic, but it wasn't him. It was Victoria, her mother-in-law, the woman who had chosen Alessa specifically because she was weak and poor and had no one to defend her. The woman who had spent 3 years making Alessa feel small and worthless and grateful for every scrap of attention. Victoria was smiling. It was a terrible smile, full of satisfaction and cruelty. She was wearing her usual expensive clothes, a cream-colored suit that cost more than most people made in a month, pearls around her neck that had been in the Hart family for generations. Her gray hair was perfectly styled. Her makeup was perfectly applied. Everything about her was perfect on the outside and rotten on the inside. "I always knew this day would come," Victoria said pleasantly, like they were discussing the weather. "I told Dominic from the beginning that you weren't good enough, that you were just a temporary solution, that Serena would come back eventually and everything would be as it should be." She walked into the room and looked around with disgust, like Alessa had contaminated the space just by existing in it. "I see you're packing. Good. Make sure you don't take anything that doesn't belong to you. I'll be checking your suitcase before you leave." Alessa felt anger rising in her chest. For 3 years she had swallowed her pride. For 3 years she had accepted Victoria's insults and criticisms without fighting back. But what was the point of being polite now? She had already lost everything. She had nothing left to protect. "I never took anything from your family," Alessa said quietly. Her voice was steadier than she expected. "I never wanted your money or your jewelry or your fancy things. I just wanted to be loved. I just wanted to belong somewhere. But you made sure that would never happen, didn't you? You hated me from the first day." Victoria laughed. It was a cold, harsh sound that echoed off the walls. "Hate you? My dear, I never cared about you enough to hate you. You were nothing, a placeholder, a warm body to keep my son company until the real thing came along. Do you know why I picked you out of all the other women Dominic could have married? Because you had no one, no family to cause problems, no friends to interfere, no money to make demands. You were completely alone in the world, which meant you were completely under my control." She stepped closer to Alessa, her expensive perfume overwhelming and suffocating. "I knew you would be grateful. I knew you would be obedient. I knew you would cook and clean and smile and never complain. Because where else would you go? What else would you do? You needed us far more than we ever needed you. And now that we don't need you anymore, you can go back to being nobody. Back to being nothing. Back to the gutter where you belong." Alessa's hands were shaking, but she refused to cry. She had cried enough already. She had cried an ocean of tears for people who didn't deserve a single drop. "I may have come from nothing," Alessa said slowly, looking Victoria directly in the eyes. "But at least I have a heart. At least I know how to love someone without conditions, without calculations, without keeping score. You and your son and your whole family, you don't know what real love is. You only know how to use people and throw them away. One day that's going to catch up with you. One day you're going to be alone and scared and desperate, and there won't be anyone left who cares enough to help you." Victoria's smile faltered for just a second, just a tiny flicker of something that might have been doubt or fear. But then it was gone, and her face was cold and hard again. "Big words from a woman packing a broken suitcase," Victoria said. "Save your speeches for someone who cares. You have 4 hours left. Don't be late. And don't forget to leave your house keys on the table by the door. You won't be needing them anymore." She turned and walked out, leaving Alessa alone with her small pile of belongings and her shattered heart. The next few hours passed in a blur. Alessa finished packing. She checked every drawer and every shelf to make sure she hadn't forgotten anything, even though there was almost nothing to forget. She took off her wedding ring and left it on the dresser. It had never felt right on her finger anyway. It had always felt like a chain, not a symbol of love. The end. When she was done, she sat on the edge of the bed and looked around the room one last time. This was where she had slept for 3 years. This was where she had dreamed of a better future. This was where she had prayed every night for her husband to love her. The bed was huge and empty, big enough for 2 people, but always occupied by just one, because Dominic came to bed late and left early and never once reached across the space between them. She wouldn't miss this room, she wouldn't miss this house, she wouldn't miss the cold marble floors and the expensive chandeliers and the paintings that nobody ever looked at. But she would miss the dream of belonging somewhere, the dream of being loved, the dream of having a family again after losing everyone she cared about. That dream was dead now. It was time to bury it and move on. Alessa picked up her suitcase and walked downstairs. Her footsteps echoed through the empty hallway. The house was quiet now. She didn't know where Dominic and Serena and Daniel had gone. Maybe they were in another part of the mansion, planning their future together. Maybe they had already forgotten she existed. When she reached the bottom of the stairs, she found that she was wrong. They hadn't forgotten her. They were waiting for her. The entire Hart family was gathered in the main hall. Dominic and Serena stood together, holding hands, looking like the perfect couple from a magazine cover. Daniel was beside them, holding Serena's other hand. Victoria stood a few feet away with her arms crossed and her chin lifted high. But they weren't alone. Dominic's 2 brothers were there, tall and handsome, and cruel, just like him. His cousins were there, a whole group of them, all dressed in expensive clothes and looking at Alessa like she was dirt on their shoes. His aunts and uncles were there, the old money crowd who had never spoken more than 2 words to her in 3 years. They were all there, they were all watching, they were all waiting to see her leave in shame. Alessa's heart started pounding, her palms grew sweaty. She wanted to turn around and run back upstairs, to hide in a closet somewhere until they all went away. But there was nowhere to hide. There was nowhere to run. This was her punishment for daring to think she could be one of them. This was the price of her foolish hope. She forced herself to keep walking, 1 foot in front of the other, head held high, even though she wanted to curl up and disappear. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. She would not let them see how much they had hurt her. The security guards were waiting by the front door. 2 large men in black suits, the same men who used to nod politely at her when she came home from shopping, the same men who used to call her Mrs. Hart with respect in their voices. Now they looked at her with blank expressions, ready to escort her out like a criminal, like a thief who had been caught stealing silver. "Wait!" It was Daniel's voice, high and clear and innocent. Everyone turned to look at him. "Mommy," Daniel said, tugging on Serena's hand. "Is that the bad lady, the one Grandma told me about?" Victoria's smile got wider. "Yes, sweetheart, that's the bad lady, but don't worry. She's leaving now. She'll never bother us again." "Good." Daniel said with the simple cruelty that only children can have. "I don't like bad ladies. They should go away and never come back." Someone laughed, then someone else. Then the whole room was laughing, all these rich, powerful people in their expensive clothes, laughing at Alessa like she was a joke, like she was entertainment, like her pain was funny. Alessa felt something break inside her. Not her heart, that was already broken. Something deeper, something that had been holding her together. She felt tears streaming down her face, but she couldn't stop them anymore. She couldn't be strong anymore. She was just a woman with a broken suitcase, and no one in the world who loved her. Dominic stepped forward. He wasn't laughing. His face was cold and serious, the face of a businessman finishing a deal. "Goodbye, Alessa," he said. "Don't ever come back." That was it. No thank you for 3 years of service, no apology for the way things ended, no kindness, no warmth, no humanity. Just goodbye and don't ever come back. The security guards opened the front door. Outside, it was raining. Of course it was raining. The sky was crying even if Alessa couldn't let herself cry anymore. The guards escorted her down the front steps, past the fancy cars parked in the circular driveway, past the fountain that cost more than most people's houses, past the iron gates that separated the Hart Mansion from the rest of the world. And then they left her there, standing on the sidewalk in the rain with her broken suitcase, with no umbrella, no money, no phone, nowhere to go. The gates closed behind her with a heavy clang that sounded like a prison door. The security guards walked back to the house without looking at her. The lights in the mansion windows glowed warm and golden, showing a life she was no longer part of. Alessa stood there for a long time, minutes maybe, or hours. She lost track. The rain soaked through her clothes and plastered her hair to her face. Her suitcase got wet, and the broken zipper started to come apart even more. She was cold and tired and more alone than she had ever been in her entire life. Finally, she started walking. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she couldn't stay here. She walked down the long, dark street, lined with other mansions, houses belonging to other rich families who would never notice one wet, sad woman passing by. She walked until her feet hurt, until her legs ached, until she couldn't walk anymore. She ended up at the bus station downtown. It was nearly empty at this hour, just a few homeless people sleeping on benches, and a tired security guard who didn't even look up when she came in. Alessa found an empty bench in the corner, away from the flickering fluorescent lights, and sat down. Her wet clothes dripped onto the floor. Her broken suitcase sat beside her like a loyal dog. This was it. This was her life now. A woman alone in a bus station with nothing but a suitcase full of memories and a heart full of pain. She cried then, really cried. Not the polite, silent tears she had shed in the mansion, but huge, racking sobs that shook her whole body. She cried for her parents who died too young. She cried for the girl she used to be, full of hope and dreams. She cried for the woman she had become, broken and used and thrown away. She cried until there were no more tears left, until her eyes were swollen and her throat was raw, and her chest felt hollow. And then, sitting on that hard bench in that empty bus station, wet and cold, and completely alone, Alessa made herself a promise. She would come back. She would make something of herself. She would become so rich and so powerful that the Hart family would beg for her help. She would make Dominic regret the day he threw her away. She would make Victoria choke on her cruel words. She would show them all that she was not nothing, that she was not garbage to be discarded, that she was a person worthy of love and respect. She didn't know how she would do it. She didn't know where she would start. She just knew that she would not let this be the end of her story. She would not let them win. She would survive, and she would fight, and she would rise from the ashes of her broken life like a phoenix rising from flames. One day, she whispered to herself, her voice hoarse from crying. One day I will come back, and when I do, everything will be different. I swear it. I swear on my parents' graves. I swear on everything I have left. I will make them pay for what they did to me. It wasn't much of a promise, just words whispered by a broken woman in an empty bus station, but it was all she had. And sometimes, when you have nothing else, a promise is enough to keep you alive. Alessa wiped her face with her wet sleeve. She straightened her back. She lifted her chin. She was still crying inside, might never stop crying inside, but on the outside she was going to be strong. She had to be strong. There was no one else to be strong for her. She opened her suitcase and found the only money she had, a $20 bill she had hidden in her journal for emergencies. She bought a bus ticket to the city 200 miles away, a place where she knew no one and no one knew her, a place where she could start over, a place where she could become someone new. The bus left at midnight. Alessa sat by the window and watched as the city lights grew smaller and smaller behind her. Somewhere in that city was the Hart Mansion, where Dominic and Serena were probably celebrating their reunion. Somewhere in that city was the life she used to have, the dream she used to believe in. She turned away from the window and faced forward. The past was behind her. The future was ahead. She didn't know what that future would hold, but she knew one thing for certain. She would never be weak again. She would never let anyone hurt her like this again. She would become strong and powerful and untouchable. And one day, when she was ready, she would return. And when that day came, Dominic Hart would be the one crying. The bus ride took 6 hours. Alessa didn't sleep. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Dominic's cold face telling her to leave. She saw Victoria's cruel smile. She saw Daniel pointing at her and calling her the bad lady. She saw the whole Hart family laughing at her while she walked out in shame. So she kept her eyes open and watched the darkness pass by outside the window. Small towns with flickering streetlights, empty highways stretching into nowhere, gas stations glowing like lonely islands in the night. The world was so big, and she was so small, and she had no idea what she was going to do next. The bus arrived in the new city just as the sun was coming up. Alessa stepped off with her broken suitcase and looked around. The bus station here was bigger and dirtier than the one she had left. People rushed past her without looking, everyone hurrying to get somewhere, everyone with a purpose and a destination. Alessa had neither. She just stood there, lost and scared, and trying not to show it. She had $17 left after buying the bus ticket, $17 to start a new life. It wasn't enough for a hotel room, it wasn't enough for much of anything, but it was what she had, so she would have to make it work. The first few days were the hardest days of her life, harder than losing her parents, harder than her loveless marriage, harder than being thrown out like garbage, because at least during those times, she had a roof over her head. She had food to eat. She had a bed to sleep in. Now she had nothing. She slept in the bus station the first night, curled up on a bench with her suitcase as a pillow. A security guard woke her up at 3 a.m. and told her to leave. She walked the streets until she found a 24-hour laundromat where the owner let her sit in the corner if she stayed quiet. She washed her face in the bathroom sink and tried to make herself look presentable. The second day, she started looking for work. She went to every restaurant and store and business she could find, asking if they needed help. Most of them said no without even looking at her. A few of them looked at her wrinkled clothes and messy hair and said they would call her, but she knew they never would. One manager laughed in her face and asked if she was joking. By the end of the second day, Alessa had eaten nothing but a stale bagel she found in a trash can. She was so hungry, her stomach hurt. She was so tired she could barely stand. She sat on a park bench as the sun went down, and wondered if this was how her story would end. Not with revenge and triumph, but with a hungry woman dying alone on a park bench in a city where nobody knew her name. But then something happened, something small, something that changed everything. An old woman sat down next to her on the bench. She was tiny and wrinkled, with white hair pulled back in a bun, and kind eyes that crinkled when she smiled. She was carrying a bag of breadcrumbs, which she started throwing to the pigeons gathered at her feet. "You look like you're having a hard time, dear," the old woman said, without looking at Alessa. Her voice was soft and gentle, like a grandmother from a storybook. Alessa didn't want to talk. She didn't want to explain her situation to a stranger, but something about the old woman's kindness broke through her defenses. "I lost everything," Alessa heard herself say. "My husband left me. I have no money, no job, no place to live. I don't know what I'm going to do." The old woman nodded slowly, still throwing breadcrumbs to the pigeons. "That's a heavy burden for such young shoulders. But you know what my grandmother used to tell me? She used to say that the darkest night comes right before the dawn. When everything seems hopeless, that's when things are about to change." Alessa shook her head. "I don't think things are going to change for me. I think this is it. This is my life now." The old woman finally turned to look at her. Her eyes were sharp and bright, full of wisdom, and something else that Alessa couldn't identify. "Do you believe that? Really believe it? Because if you believe you're beaten, then you are. But if you believe you can rise again, then you will. The only person who gets to decide your future is you. Not your ex-husband, not the people who hurt you. You." She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. It was old and worn, with faded letters that Alessa could barely read. "My granddaughter runs a small restaurant downtown. She's always looking for hard workers. Tell her Grandma Rose sent you. She'll give you a chance." Alessa took the card with trembling hands. "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." Grandma Rose smiled and patted Alessa's hand. "Because someone helped me once, a long time ago, when I had nothing and no one. I've been paying it forward ever since. That's how the world works, dear. Or at least, that's how it should work. Kindness spreads if you let it." She stood up, brushed the breadcrumbs off her dress, and started walking away. Then she stopped and looked back over her shoulder. "One more thing. Whatever those people did to you, whatever they said, don't let it poison your heart. Revenge might feel good for a moment, but it will eat you alive from the inside. The best revenge is living well. Remember that." And then she was gone, disappearing into the evening crowd like she had never been there at all. Alessa looked down at the business card in her hand. "Maria's Kitchen," it said. Good food, fair prices, friendly service. There was an address and a phone number. It wasn't much. It was just a business card from a stranger. But it was something. It was a door. And Alessa had learned a long time ago that when life gives you a door, you walk through it and see where it leads. The next morning, she went to Maria's Kitchen. It was a small restaurant in a quiet neighborhood with checkered tablecloths and the smell of fresh bread baking in the ovens. Maria was a large, cheerful woman with Grandma Rose's kind eyes and a loud laugh that filled the whole room. She took one look at Alessa, listened to her story, and hired her on the spot. "Grandma Rose has never been wrong about people," Maria said. "If she sent you to me, then you're worth taking a chance on. You can start today, minimum wage plus tips. It's not much, but it's honest work." Alessa almost cried. She had been prepared to beg, to grovel, to do whatever it took. She hadn't been prepared for simple kindness. "Thank you," she whispered. "You won't regret this, I promise." And she kept that promise. She worked harder than she had ever worked in her life. She arrived early and stayed late. She learned every recipe in Maria's cookbook. She memorized the names and favorite orders of every regular customer. She scrubbed floors and washed dishes and waited tables and never complained, never called in sick, never asked for a day off. Maria let her sleep in the small apartment above the restaurant until she could afford a place of her own. It was just one room with a tiny bathroom and a mattress on the floor, but to Alessa, it felt like a palace. It was hers. She had earned it. Nobody could take it away from her. Months passed. Alessa saved every penny she could. She ate the leftover food from the restaurant instead of buying groceries. She walked everywhere instead of taking the bus. She didn't buy new clothes or go to movies or do anything that cost money. Every dollar she saved was a dollar closer to her goal. But she didn't just work and save, she also learned. During her breaks, she read books, business books, finance books, marketing books. She read about people who started with nothing and built empires. She read about strategies and investments and opportunities. She read until her eyes hurt, until the words blurred together, until Maria had to force her to put the books down and get some sleep. At night, she took free online classes, accounting, management, computer skills, anything that might help her climb higher. She was like a sponge, soaking up knowledge, desperate to fill her brain with tools she could use to build a better future. 1 year passed, then 2, then 3. Alessa was no longer just a waitress. Maria had promoted her to assistant manager, then partner. Together they opened a second location, then a third. Alessa had a talent for business that surprised even her. She knew how to make customers happy. She knew how to train employees. She knew how to cut costs without cutting quality. Everything she had learned from running the Hart household, all those skills Victoria had dismissed as worthless, turned out to be exactly what she needed. By the end of the 3rd year, Alessa had saved enough money to make her first investment. A small apartment building that was falling apart, sold cheap by an owner who didn't want to deal with it anymore. Everyone told her she was crazy. Everyone said she was wasting her money. But Alessa saw something they didn't see. She saw potential. She fixed up the building herself, working nights and weekends. She painted walls and replaced pipes and planted flowers in the courtyard. She found good tenants and charged fair prices and treated everyone with respect. Within a year, the building was full and profitable. She used that profit to buy another building, then another, then another. 4 years after being thrown out of the Hart mansion with nothing but a broken suitcase, Alessa owned 12 apartment buildings, had a stake in 5 restaurants, and had more money in the bank than she had ever dreamed possible. But she wasn't done. She wasn't even close to done. She started her own company, a property development firm that bought old buildings and turned them into beautiful homes. She hired good people and paid them well and treated them like family. She made smart deals and avoided bad ones. She grew her company year after year, always reinvesting, always expanding, always reaching for more. 5 years passed, then 6, and then, on a cold December morning exactly 6 years after she had left the Hart mansion in the rain, Alessa stood at the window of her penthouse office and looked out at the city below. She was a different person now. Her hair was perfectly styled, her clothes were perfectly tailored, her nails were perfectly manicured. She looked like a queen, like a goddess, like everything Serena had pretended to be, but never really was. But it wasn't just her appearance that had changed. It was everything: her confidence, her power, her place in the world. Alessa was now worth $4 billion. She owned buildings in 5 countries. She had been on the cover of Fortune magazine. She had shaken hands with presidents and dined with kings. She was one of the most powerful women in the world, and she had built it all herself, from nothing, with nothing but her own 2 hands, and her refusal to give up. Her assistant Grace knocked on the door and came in with a tablet. Grace was smart and efficient and completely loyal. She had been with Alessa for 3 years and knew all her secrets. "Your schedule for today," Grace said. meeting with the mayor at 2, dinner with the governor at 7, and… She paused and something flickered across her face. The Hart Corporation sent another request for a meeting. That's the 5th one this month. They're getting desperate. Alessa felt something cold and satisfied settle in her chest. The Hart Corporation, Dominic's company, the empire that Victoria was always bragging about, the legacy that was supposed to last forever. What do they want? Alessa asked, even though she already knew. They need investment, badly. Their stock has dropped 40% in the last month. Investors are fleeing, banks are calling in loans. If they don't find someone to help them soon, they'll go bankrupt. Grace looked at Alessa with curious eyes. Should I decline the meeting again? Alessa was quiet for a long moment. She thought about that rainy night 6 years ago. She thought about Dominic's cold voice saying, "Don't ever come back." She thought about Victoria's cruel smile, and Daniel calling her the bad lady and the whole family. Laughing while she walked out in shame. She had dreamed about this moment for 6 years. She had worked toward it, planned for it, sacrificed for it. And now it was here. No, Alessa said slowly. Don't decline. Accept the meeting. Tell them I'll see Dominic Hart tomorrow at my office. And Grace? She smiled, and it was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a cat who had finally caught the mouse. Make him wait. The return of the Queen. Dominic Hart arrived at Alessa's office at exactly 10 in the morning. Grace made him wait in the lobby for 1 hour, then 2 hours, then 3. He sat on the expensive leather couch, checking his phone, tapping his foot, looking at the clock on the wall every few minutes. The receptionist offered him water and coffee, and he refused both. He was too nervous to drink anything. Alessa watched him on the security camera in her office. She watched him squirm and sweat and check his phone again and again. She remembered all the times he had made her wait, all the dinners that got cold because he came home late without calling, all the conversations that never happened because he was too busy for her, all the nights she lay awake waiting for him to come to bed, only to fall asleep alone. Now it was his turn to wait, and she was going to enjoy every minute of it. Finally, after 3 hours and 17 minutes, Grace went down to the lobby and told Dominic that Ms. Chen would see him now. Alessa had taken back her maiden name years ago. She was no longer Alessa Hart. She was Alessa Chen, the woman who built an empire from nothing. Grace led Dominic through the long hallways of Alessa's company headquarters. The walls were decorated with awards and magazine covers, and photographs of Alessa shaking hands with important people. Dominic looked at each one as he passed, his face getting paler and paler as he realized just how powerful his ex-wife had become. The office door opened and Dominic walked in, and then he stopped. He just stopped and stared, his mouth hanging open like a fish, his eyes wide with shock. Alessa was sitting behind a massive desk made of dark polished wood. The wall behind her was made entirely of glass, showing a view of the entire city spread out below like a map. She was wearing a white suit that cost more than most people's cars. Simple and elegant and absolutely perfect. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek bun. Diamond earrings sparkled in her ears. She looked like a queen on her throne, untouchable and powerful and completely in control. She did not stand up to greet him. She did not offer him a seat. She did not smile or say hello or pretend to be happy to see him. She just looked at him with cold eyes and waited for him to speak first. Dominic looked terrible. Alessa could see that now that he was closer. His suit was expensive but wrinkled, like he had slept in it. There were dark circles under his eyes, purple and deep, the kind that come from weeks of not sleeping. His hair was messy, his hands were shaking. This was not the confident, powerful man who had thrown her out 6 years ago. This was a man who was scared and desperate and running out of options. "Alessa," he said. His voice cracked on her name. "Thank you for seeing me. I know I don't deserve it. I know I have no right to ask you for anything after what I did." She still didn't speak. She just kept looking at him, letting the silence stretch out until it became uncomfortable. Dominic shifted his weight from one foot to the other. Sweat was starting to form on his forehead. "I need your help," he finally continued. "The company is dying. Serena, she betrayed me. She's been stealing from the company for years. Millions and millions of dollars, moved to secret accounts, hidden from everyone. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I trusted her completely, and she used that trust to rob me blind." He took a shaky breath. "She ran away last month, took everything she could carry and disappeared. The police are looking for her, but they haven't found her yet. And now the banks know what happened. The investors know. Everyone knows. They're all pulling out. If I don't find someone to invest in the company in the next 2 weeks, we'll lose everything. The company, the houses, the cars, everything my family has built for 3 generations, gone. My mother will be on the streets. My brothers will have nothing. We'll all have nothing." He stopped and looked at Alessa with desperate eyes. "Please, I know I hurt you. I know what I did was unforgivable. But please, help me. Not for me. For my family. For Daniel. He's innocent in all of this. He doesn't deserve to suffer because of my mistakes." Alessa leaned back in her chair and studied him for a long moment. She thought about all the things she had planned to say, all the cruel words she had rehearsed in her head over the years, all the ways she had imagined making him suffer. But now that the moment was here, she found that she didn't want to say any of those things. She didn't feel satisfaction or triumph or joy. She just felt tired, tired of carrying the weight of her anger for so long, tired of letting the past control her present. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a folder. She slid it across the desk toward him. "Open it," she said. Her voice was calm and steady, giving nothing away. Dominic opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside was a birth certificate. He read it once. His face went white. He read it again. His hands started shaking so badly that the paper rattled. "This isn't possible," he whispered. "This can't be true. Serena showed me a DNA test. She swore to me that Daniel was mine. She swore on her life." "She lied," Alessa said simply. "About everything. Daniel's real father was a man named Marcus Webb, Serena's ex-boyfriend. He died 7 years ago in a car accident before she came back to you. She took his child and pretended he was yours so she could get back into your family, so she could get access to your money. Everything she told you was a lie from the very beginning." Dominic made a sound like a wounded animal. He collapsed into the chair across from Alessa's desk and put his head in his hands. His whole body shook with sobs. He cried like a child, ugly and loud and completely broken. "I gave up everything for her," he choked out between sobs. "I threw away my wife, my marriage, my future, for a woman who never loved me, for a child who isn't even mine. And now I've lost it all anyway. I've lost everything." Alessa watched him cry. She had imagined this moment so many times. She had pictured herself laughing at his pain, mocking him, throwing his own words back in his face. "Don't ever come back," she had planned to say. How does it feel now? But watching him fall apart in front of her, she didn't feel any of those things. She felt something unexpected, something she didn't want to feel. She felt sorry for him, not forgiveness, not love, not even kindness, just a tired sort of pity for a man who had been as foolish as she once was. He had believed in a lie, just like she had believed in a lie. He had trusted someone who didn't deserve his trust, just like she had. He had lost everything because of love, just like she had. They were the same, really. 2 people destroyed by the same woman. 2 fools who wanted to be loved so badly that they couldn't see the truth right in front of them. Dominic finally looked up. His eyes were red and swollen. His face was wet with tears. He looked old and broken and nothing like the powerful man she had married. "You must be happy," he said bitterly. "You must love seeing me like this. After what I did to you, I deserve it. I deserve all of it." Alessa shook her head slowly. "I don't love it. I thought I would. I dreamed about this moment for years. I worked toward it, planned for it, sacrificed for it. I thought watching you suffer would make me feel better. I thought it would heal the wounds you gave me." She paused and looked out the window at the city below. "But it doesn't. Seeing you in pain doesn't take away my pain. It doesn't change the past. It doesn't give me back the years I lost. It just makes me feel empty." She turned back to look at him. "I'm not going to destroy you, Dominic. That's not why I came back. I came back because I had something to prove. I came back because I needed to show myself that I was worth more than you made me feel. And I did that. I proved it. Not to you or your mother or anyone else. To myself. That's what mattered. That's what healed me." She opened another drawer and pulled out a second folder. This one was thicker, filled with legal documents and contracts. "This is an investment agreement. My company will buy a controlling stake in Hart Corporation. I'll bring in new management, new systems, new everything. I'll fix what Serena broke. The company will survive. Your family won't end up on the streets." Dominic's eyes widened with hope. "You'll save us, after everything I did to you." "I'll save the company," Alessa corrected him. "Not because you deserve it, not because I forgive you. I'll never forgive you for what you did. But there are innocent people involved, employees who will lose their jobs, families who depend on those paychecks. And yes, Daniel, he's just a child. He didn't choose his parents. He didn't choose any of this." She leaned forward and looked Dominic directly in the eyes. "But there are conditions. You will step down as CEO. You will have no role in the company's operations. You will sign over your voting rights to my representatives, and you will never contact me again. After today, we are strangers. You will not call me, you will not email me. You will not show up at my office or my home or anywhere I might be. If I see you on the street, you will cross to the other side. Do you understand?" Dominic nodded frantically. Yes, I understand. I'll do whatever you want. Anything." "Good." Alessa pushed the folder toward him. "Sign the papers. My lawyers will handle the rest." He signed with shaking hands, page after page, not even reading what he was agreeing to. When he was done, he put down the pen and looked at her one more time. "Alessa, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know words can't undo what I did, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I was blind and stupid and cruel. You deserved so much better than how I treated you. I see that now. I see everything now." Alessa felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but something like release, like a door closing on a room she had been trapped in for too long. "Goodbye, Dominic," she said softly. "I hope you find whatever you're looking for. I hope you become a better man, but I hope you do it far away from me." She pressed a button on her desk. "Grace, please escort Mr. Hart out." Dominic stood up on unsteady legs. He looked like he wanted to say something more, but no words came. He just nodded once, picked up his briefcase, and walked out of her office forever. Alessa sat alone in the silence after he left. She looked out the window at the city, at the buildings she owned, at the empire she had built from nothing. She had done it. She had won. She had proven to herself and the world that she was not nothing, that she was not garbage to be thrown away, that she was a person of value and worth and power. But winning felt different than she had expected. It didn't feel like triumph. It didn't feel like joy. It felt like relief, like putting down a heavy bag she had been carrying for too long, like finally being able to breathe after years of holding her breath. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Maria, the woman who had given her a chance when she had nothing. "Thinking of you today," the text said. "Your parents would be so proud." Alessa smiled and wiped a tear from her eye. She had come so far, from a wet bench in a bus station to a penthouse office overlooking the city, from a woman with nothing to a woman with everything, from broken to whole. And yet she knew that this wasn't really the end of her story. It was just the end of one chapter. There would be more challenges ahead, more mountains to climb, more battles to fight. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She had survived the worst thing that ever happened to her. She had turned her pain into power. There was nothing left to be afraid of. She stood up and walked to the window. The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. It was beautiful. It was a new day ending and a new day about to begin. "I did it," she whispered to the reflection in the glass. "I did it, Mom. I did it, Dad. I survived." She pressed her hand against the cold glass and made herself a new promise. Not a promise of revenge this time. Not a promise of anger or bitterness or pain. A promise of something better. She would use her power to help others. She would give chances to people who had none, just like Maria had given her a chance. She would build shelters for women leaving bad marriages. She would create scholarships for kids from poor families. She would spread kindness wherever she went, paying forward the kindness that Grandma Rose had shown her on that park bench so many years ago. Because that old woman had been right. Revenge might feel good for a moment, but it eats you alive from the inside. The best revenge really is living well, living with joy and purpose and love in your heart. Alessa had spent 6 years being angry, 6 years planning revenge, 6 years carrying the weight of her hate like a stone around her neck. And yes, she had won. She had beaten the people who hurt her. But winning wasn't what set her free. Letting go was what set her free. She smiled at her reflection in the glass. She was 40 years old now. Her life was half over, maybe more. But she finally felt like it was just beginning. "Here's to new chapters," she said out loud to no one and everyone. "Here's to second chances. Here's to becoming the person I was always meant to be." She turned away from the window, picked up her phone, and called Maria. "How would you feel about opening a new restaurant?" Alessa asked. "A really big one, with a shelter attached. A place where women can go when they have nowhere else. A place where they can start over, like I did." Maria laughed, that big warm laugh that Alessa loved so much. "I think that sounds perfect. When do we start?" "Right now," Alessa said. "We start right now." And so began the next chapter of Alessa Chen's story. Not a story of revenge, not a story of pain, a story of healing and helping and hope. A story of a woman who had every reason to become bitter and hard, but chose to become kind and strong instead. A story that would inspire millions of people around the world to believe that no matter how bad things get, no matter how broken you feel, no matter how hopeless the future seems, you can always rise again. Because that's the truth about life. It breaks all of us sometimes. It knocks us down and stomps on us and makes us feel like nothing. But we don't have to stay down. We can get back up, we can dust ourselves off, we can keep going. And if we're brave enough, if we're strong enough, if we refuse to give up no matter what, we can turn our scars into stars. We can transform our pain into power. We can become the heroes of our own stories. That's what Alessa did. That's what anyone can do. You just have to believe that you're worth fighting for, because you are. You are always were. Thank you for watching Mr. Hope's story.